minutes ago about the different sounds that the letter C can make. So let's take a few minutes now looking at the different sounds. The hard, we call them the hard and soft sounds of C, the letter C. C is a what? Let's use the terminology that we do. It's a consonant, but when I say C, is that a letter or sound?
Letter.
It's a letter, it's a grapheme, okay? And G. So we're going, and G, again, is a grapheme, it's a letter. Whenever we talk about letters, remember they're graphemes. They're a written representation of the sounds. So now we talk about sound, the different sounds of C and G. So we call them hard and soft. Give me some examples of words that start with C. Let's do one at a time.
Cut.
Cut.
Cat.
Cat.
Cranberry.
Cranberry. What's the C in there? A C is part. This C in cranberry is part of the what? Consonant. Blend. C-R. Okay. Cold.
Curl.
Curl. Let's think about the other vowels. We've got it with an A, with an U, with an O.
Citation.
Okay. Citation. What about cycle? What about celery, right, or city? So, what do you notice about the vowels that follow the initial C?
If it starts with the I, the vowels I or Y, it makes a sound. And if it's an A, U.
Okay, most of the time, because we know it's not always, because we'll look at some exceptions, okay? Most of the time, the C has a hard sound, and what's the hard sound of C? K, right. So, the hard sound of C is the K sound. Like cat, like cake, like curl, like cut. So, C, most of the time, has a hard sound when it's followed by what vowels?
O, A,
A,
U.
O, or U, most of the time. It has a soft sound, and what would be the soft sound of C? S, which sounds like an S, when it's followed by what vowels?
Y or
Most of the time, I, E, and Y. Most of the time. Not always. We have, yes, cycle. Cycle's a good example of the two different sounds, isn't it? Cycle. What C sound do you hear at the beginning of cycle?
the S, the soft.
It's the soft sound. What about the cold?
Hard.
Okay, and when we have the cold sound at the end, what's that vowel sound called? The upside down E.
When what?
The schwa. The O. Cycle.
Oh, yeah.
O. Okay, all right.
Like,
Okay, that's just kind of going back and pulling it all together. All right, cycle. So, is the Y in the word cycle acting like a vowel or a consonant?
vowel.
A vowel, because every syllable has to have a vowel sound, right? So if we were dividing it into syllables, where would I divide it? Cycle. So the Y has to be the vowel, right? Because every syllable has to have a vowel. So the Y takes on what sound? Cycle. The long I. We're kind of getting these together. So if the same thing with W, the Y and the W, if they're in the middle of the word, most of the time, they take on the role of a vowel. If they're at the beginning of a word, they're a consonant. End of the word, they're a consonant. We'll finish that in a minute. All right. So most of the time, if the consonant C is followed by A, O, or U, like in cut, cold, cake, cranberry, or it's when it's in a blend, it's the hard sound. If it's followed by an I, E, or Y, most of the time, it's a soft sound. Okay. Let's do the same thing is true with the G. What's the hard sound of G? Go. All right. Go. Garage. Oh, that's another good one. That's got two. So we're finding that we usually have a hard sound when it's in a blend too, huh? Cranberry, glue. All right, let's see, we don't have a GI. Give me a GI.
Giraffe.
Giraffe. Here's another exception. Didn't we say usually I is a soft sound?
Girl.
All right, so the same is true for the G. Usually, it sounds like G when it's followed by A, O, U. And what's the soft sound of G? J. And it sounds like a J when it's followed by I, E, or Y. Most of the time, but not always. All right, so is the G in go hard or soft? Which column would you put it in? Go. Hard G. Get. Hard G, but it's followed by an E. Exception. So, but what about gem? Soft. So G-E-T is get with a hard G. G-E-M, change that last sound. You go from a hard sound to a soft sound. Get, gem. So when your students are trying to pick up on how all of these sounds fit together, if they say gem on that, it's because they're trying to follow the rule, but it doesn't always work. All right. So, gem, hard or soft sound of G?
Hard. Soft. I mean,
Gem.
soft.
Okay, okay. Gum. Giraffe. Soft.
Yeah.
Garage.
Hard.
Hard and soft. G. Hard. Raj. J. That's really not even a J, is it? It's kind of like a, if we had to write that, and if you looked at the sound spelling in the dictionary, some people call it garage, some people call it garage, and leave out some of the sounds, but that's okay because we know we do that dialectically. But regardless of how you pronounce it, you have two different sounds of G in that word, right? If you call it garage, or if you call it garage, and just have it one syllable. So you got the difference between the hard and the soft sounds. It depends on the vowel, but it's in most of the time, but not always, just like everything else we've talked about. So sometimes Y is a vowel, sometimes it's a consonant. Sometimes W is a vowel, sometimes W is a consonant. So I want you to give me some words that has the Y and the W in different positions in the word. Beginning, middle, end.
Yo-yo.
Think about some more. So, okay. Which, yellow?
I said yo-yo.
Well, we're going to start with one that has both. So that's good. Okay. Yo-yo, yummy. Two different sounds of Y again. We used one a while ago when we were looking at the hard and soft sounds of C and G. What about the word, I should have put these over here under the
Window.
the Y.
Window.
And window. What about this?
What about analysis?
Hmm?
Use it with analysis.
Oh, what about the word analysis? Oh, there's a good one that we already had up there. Okay, so we've got several Y's, so let's talk about the Y. So let's look at, I want you to look at the words that we wrote here. Cycle by, yummy, yellow, yo-yo, Tammy, windy, window. Okay, let's start with the Y. What sound does Y usually have when it's at the beginning of a word?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a consonant sound. Most of the time when Y is at the beginning of a word and says yeah, which is another problem, isn't it? Because the name of the letter is Y, and if you try to sound out how that should be spelled, it sounds like it starts with a W, doesn't it? Y. But it doesn't. So we tell our students, this letter that's pronounced, that if you say the letter name is Y, it's pronounced yeah. Doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is, okay? So, the big Y at the beginning of the word, when the Y makes the yeah sound, it's acting as a consonant. What sounds can Y have when it's at the end of a word?
A E.
Sounds like a long E, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yummy. That sounds like a long E sound. Tammy. Long E sound. And what sound does Y have in the word buy? It's got a long I. So, what can our rule be then if we're going to do an analysis? If we're, rather than synthetic, synthetic phonics, or we're doing analytic, if we're analyzing here, when Y is at the beginning of a word, it usually has the
consonant sound.
The consonant, and it sounds like yeah, like yellow and your and yes. But when Y is in the middle or the end of a word, it can have the
Vowel.
what vowel sound?
The long E.
Long E,
Long.
like in yummy, belly, tummy, E when it's at the end. Or if it's in the middle, it can have a long I sound. Actually, is that in the middle?
But it's also like by,
It's really
B-Y.
not, is it? That's at the end. Yeah, just like that. It's at the end of a word. So, when Y is in the middle or the end of a word, it acts like a vowel. It can sound long E, E, or it can sound long I. Let's look at the W. When W is at the beginning of a word, just like Y, it acts like a consonant. And what does it sound like? What? When W is at the beginning and sounds like what, or when it's part of a digraph, what?